welcome to The Married Therapist,
a relationship podcast
hosted by us, Luis and Amber Simide.
This podcast is all about love, conflict, and the gray areas.
If you like what you hear, be sure to like and subscribe wherever you're listening. Now let's get to the show.
We love a good limited series, and I had been seeing on social media that Shiny Happy People on Prime recently came out with their second season, so we wanted to check it out. We had never even seen the first one, and so we watched it, and we were floored. It was about the Duggars, that family that had 15,000 children. And one of the things that really popped out as we were watching was this whole focus, this whole pillar on submission, specifically wives submitting to their husbands, and how that was just very, very important. And that was just a very important part of this cult's belief system. So it just got us thinking about what we subscribe to when it comes to that, if at all, and so many other things. So what were your thoughts as you were watching that?
Yeah, it was a crazy season, and I wasn't super into the Duggars when they were out, but obviously I knew about them because they were all over the place. But I could not have imagined what was going on behind the scenes there. But with this whole idea of submission, I've always felt uncomfortable with it. And even when I became a Christian in my mid-teens, I was still kind of uncomfortable with that idea. But as I was going to youth group and was in Christian circles in my early 20s, I started to kind of change that and started to have this idea that, okay, maybe I don't necessarily think the woman needs to submit in terms of completely just do whatever the guy says. But I think they can talk about it. She can have input, but he has to make the decision at the end of the day. That's kind of where my mindset became. But that never really sat well with me either. I think that I just kind of formulated that idea because that was a good middle ground for what I truly believed with what I can fit into the dominant belief around me. But as I got older, I was just like, I don't think there needs to be any submission in the classic sense at all. I think there is mutual submission. Sometimes if there's something that you are better at than I am, I'm going to let you do it, and vice versa. Or if there's something you're more knowledgeable about, I will let you do the research on that or make the decision on that, and I will quote unquote submit to that, and vice versa. So that's kind of how I've seen submission now. I don't think submission should be based on our gender. It should really just be based on our level of expertise in that area. Just like our conversation about gender norms, it's not about what is the man's job, what's the woman's job. It's what are we good at and what do we enjoy doing. I think that's the same thing with submission. Like, what are we good at? What do we enjoy doing? What are we knowledgeable about? And that's just kind of where I stand with that, with this idea of submission.
Okay. Thank you for sharing. I want to go back a bit though and just learn how things were growing up. What did you witness? I know there was a shift when you got older, but how were things in the beginning?
Yeah. I mean, I've mentioned this before, but I grew up in a fairly traditional Hispanic household. And so the mindset was typically the man kind of made the decisions in the house, at least front facing. They definitely had conversations with each other about certain things, but at the end of the day, it was kind of my dad's decision. So it wasn't this idea of submission in the classic sense. It was more so based on gender norms. So this is kind of the man's role in the relationship or in the family, and this is the woman's role. So I think that's kind of where my parents naturally fell. It wasn't motivated or informed by their religion or anything. It was more of a cultural thing for them. And so
Okay.
that's kind of what I saw. So, when I grew up and saw that, that's one of the reasons why I never really liked the idea of submission in general, because I just didn't see that as fair, even as a kid. But again, as I became a teenager, I started to kind of connect the dots of this faith that I was growing into and learning about and what I saw growing up. And I was like, oh, that's kind of like what my parents did. So that makes sense. And I started to again kind of form my idea of what it could look like with what I knew to be true, what I was learning to think to be true and what I truly believed. And that's kind of when I made that kind of mixed version of that as a teen, early 20s.
Okay, yeah, that totally makes sense. I know for me, it was the exact opposite. My mom was the one to make all the decisions, at least what I could see.
Mm,
And this whole thing of biblical submission wasn't anything that I witnessed. Unlike you, I was raised in the church from the day that I was born.
mhm,
And for those who aren't familiar in the church, especially the Christian church, it's God and then it's the husband and then the wife and kids. So the husband submits to God and the woman submits to the husband and the kids submit.
kind of the different levels of authority.
Right.
Yeah.
So I didn't witness that. I do remember hearing about it, especially when I became a teen. I was a
Mhm.
Bible study leader and I had my own kind of supervisor person that I would go to. And we had this conversation about submission. And I remember her saying she has ideas about certain things, but at the end of the day, her husband has to make the final say. And there were times she really wanted her point of view to be accepted by her husband. So she was telling me that she had to cleverly tweak what she was saying and feed it to her husband as if it came from him, and then it would be accepted. And I remember I was a teenager being like, "That is weird.
Yeah, it's very weird.
That is not normal, and I
Yeah.
don't want that."
Yeah.
She just kinda was like, "You gotta play the game kinda thing,
Mhm.
because that's the way that things are when it comes to biblical submission." And that really struck a chord, and again, it was just a visceral response of, "Ugh."
Yeah, that doesn't make sense, and it's really sad that she can't just openly share what she wants to do out of fear that it's just gonna be shot down, you know, like, that is really sad 'cause you have your opinions, like, you are a brilliant person in and of yourself, so
Mm.
to know that in that world, I would be expected to just not really hear your side, or maybe hear your side, but then kind of have the final say, it's like, "What?" Especially if it's something that you are way more knowledgeable at than I am, like building a practice. I have no idea how to build a practice, but you do. So if we were going to build a joint practice of some kind, I would let you take the lead on that because you've done it already, and I would not be knowledgeable in that regard. So that's wild that that was kind of her way of living.
Yeah. I was like, "Absolutely not.
Mhm.
May that energy never find me."
Yes. So I guess just talk to me about your journey of what you saw and how that informed what you believed and where you're at now with all of that.
Yeah, so I always remember being uncomfortable.
Mm,
So that situation happened when I was about 18 or 19, right before I transferred to a mainland university, and I just remember being at that school and still feeling weird about this whole submission topic. Of course, as a woman, it's talked about often in religious circles. So I remember reading books about it, going to conferences. They knew that there was a group of the women who didn't like it. So I do remember them qualifying a lot of things and having a lot of prefaces like, "We know this is a dirty word.
yeah.
We know this is uncomfortable, but ladies, it's really not that bad. Like, what an honor." And the picture that they would paint essentially is your husband will take a bullet for you. Imagine there's an intruder or something like that. He will jump in front of you and take that bullet. What a privilege, what an honor, what a blessing.
Yeah.
He is your covering, and we all should be running for that. Like we all should be signing up to receive that.
Yeah.
Um I'm like, "Okay." It never fully settled, but I was like, "Oh, I do remember making a concerted effort to try to understand and accept that concept." And another thing that I heard through some Bible study was, if you don't like the word submit, switch it out for trust. Instead of wives submit to your husbands, wives trust your husband. I do remember that was easier to digest because I'm like, okay, well, I want to be able to trust someone.
Yeah.
But in my head, I just was like, that's different though. Of course, I would trust my partner,
Mhm.
but why do I have to submit to him? That means he is over me.
Yeah.
And I just don't believe that.
Yeah.
So, to be honest, I think of it as you having more value than me. And perhaps that's not what it's meant to be. I'm sure someone's listening thinking, no, you've got it wrong. But that's how I've received it.
Mhm.
And I do not believe that men are better than women, nor do I believe that women are better than men. I believe we're all on the same level. We all have an inherent worth and value. We all have different skills. And when it comes to being compensated, it should be equal. I'm very much
Yeah.
a feminist and things like that, so that's a whole other topic. But yeah, just throughout the years, I've had a hard time understanding and accepting that concept, and it just got to a certain point. I don't really know when it happened, but I just took that off the table.
Mhm.
I said, I don't like that. I don't subscribe to that. And when it comes to getting with a partner, I am going to ask those questions. I'm going to make sure that I'm with someone who aligns because it's not going to work out. Like if I was
Yeah.
with somebody who's very conservative and traditional and okay, I'm the man and you've got to submit and things like that, it wouldn't last at all.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I agree. I feel like I had the same mindset. Like if I was with someone who had that expectation, first of all, that's a lot of pressure on me, to like make all the decisions of the household, especially if I'm not knowledgeable about certain things and you are. I'm that would be weird to me to know that I had to make these decisions because then it's gonna feel like, okay, am I making the right decision? Because you're more knowledgeable about it than I am. So I don't know. I just didn't never really liked it, but now that makes sense for you how it got to that place. And I know we had that conversation at the beginning of our relationship, probably in the first couple weeks, we had the conversation of like, what do you think about gender norms and submission and things like that? I think that was actually within the first week of knowing each other. So, which is not surprise.
Yeah.
No, that's cool. So, have you received any pushback on that, or have you had anyone try to sway you in the other direction, knowing where you're at now?
So I actually don't recall ever verbalizing this to anyone,
Mm,
especially not in any kind of like Bible study setting that I've been a part of over the years, because of course I know that it most likely is a minority belief.
mhm.
And I'm not trying to create any kind of anything in an environment like that. So it's just kind of been something that I've processed
Yeah,
with on my own, and again, the most important person that I would need to have this conversation with would be a potential partner, and we did that immediately.
yeah, no, for sure. And I want to add a caveat to this whole conversation. We're not saying that this is wrong, like this mindset or this belief is wrong. It's just not what we believe because some people they completely believe in the whole submission thing and they gladly do it. Like you said, a lot of these women see it as an honor to submit to their husbands, and for them, that's great. But that's just not our story, and that's not something that we value or believe in. But I just kind of wanted to add that in case anyone's listening and they feel some type of way about believing in that. If you want to believe it and it works for you and your husband, cool, like, do that, but
Yeah,
yeah.
thank you for sharing that. And I just want to provide some context to this whole topic of biblical submission. From what I remember, the man needs to be praying. You
Mhm.
need to be in your prayer closet, consulting the Lord. That is how these decisions are made.
Right,
In case there are people listening thinking, like you just said, oh, I have to have all the answers, and that's a lot of pressure. You are getting that from the Holy Spirit.
right,
So for women who do subscribe to it, it's great and they can have confidence in knowing that their partner who's a great Christian person is going to be doing the work to get these answers for the family.
right.
So yeah, for people who subscribe to it, they feel oftentimes really good and comfortable because they know that their husband was warring in the spirit. They were truly doing so many things. They were fasting, they were consulting with their mentors, and that's how they're leading their family.
Right. Yeah, and so that's I think in an ideal world where people subscribe to this belief, that's what would be happening. But so often that's not happening, and it just becomes this power trip
Yes.
where I'm the man, you gotta listen to me. And it's like, what? You're not even doing the things that you need to do to lead this family well. So how am I gonna trust you to lead the family well if you're not doing it? So I think that's where it can be a little sticky sometimes because unfortunately, we've seen so many men, whether in real life or in the media, weaponize this concept of women are supposed to submit to the husband as a way to just dominate the whole relationship, which obviously is unhealthy and abusive, and we would never condone that. So I think that's the danger because I think you're right. Like with that, there is a level of responsibility that he has to make sure that he's fed and leading well, again, just to allow the woman to trust it. But anyway.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we saw in the documentary,
Mhm.
is that the guys had 0 accountability.
Yeah, really.
What little accountability they had was nothing,
Mhm.
and whatever they shared with us truly never went anywhere.
Mhm.
So, yeah, all about power and control, 0 checks and balances. They could do whatever they wanted. So many things were swept under the rug. So, what would happen? In the documentary, we saw this one woman whose husband would rape her regularly.
Mhm.
We saw Josh, who's the eldest Duggar son. He sexually abused his sisters.
Mhm.
The parents found out. They sent him away to this training
Just like camp.
program, but he basically was doing construction,
Yeah.
not getting any real rehab. And then he got sent right back home.
Yeah.
And then he grew up and eventually got in trouble because he had lots of child pornography on his work computer. And he even was involved in like Ashley Madison and that whole scandal.
Yeah.
And thankfully, he's currently in prison, which is good. But again, it all started with sexually abusing the daughters, which we don't know what may or may not have happened to him.
Mhm.
Bottom line is it happened and it wasn't dealt with.
Yeah. And that was when he was a teen.
Yeah.
And so because it wasn't dealt with, it just kept getting worse because you're not dealing with it and it's still happening. And so it's if you sweep it under the rug, it doesn't go away. It's just under the rug and it's going to come out eventually again, which it did.
Yeah. And in this cult that the Duggars were a part of, it gave all the men a godlike complex.
Yes.
They could do no wrong. They walked on water.
Mhm.
And that is so unhealthy. It's such an inflated sense of self.
Right.
And it, I guess, worked for them because they tend to stay in their community. So I was going to say that doesn't work in the real world, but they weren't exactly frolicking in the real world with the rest of us.
Yeah.
So it creates even more of a monster because everywhere you go, everybody subscribes to this
Right.
mentality.
Yeah, you're kind of just in this echo chamber of everyone who believes what you believe. So there's no one, like you said, no checks and balances, no one calling you out on your BS. And it's just running rampant in this community. And this community still exists. Like this isn't a thing that happened, they found out, and then they shut down this community. The community still exists and it's still doing its thing. So it's just really sad that there are communities out there that do that and that there are men and women who subscribe to this idea. And unfortunately, again, a lot of men weaponize this to have power and control over their wives and their family.
Yeah. And I can't remember the name of the cult, but the founder's name is Bill Gothard.
Mhm.
And it's just truly damaging, especially for the woman, because the guy has 0 accountability. There are so many rules
For
that
the
the
women.
woman has to follow, from how they wear their hair to how they dress. They can't wear pants, having to be meek and mild and just always kind of divert to the husband.
Yeah.
It's just so suffocating. So, of course, we're talking about a cult, a very specific sect, this kind of fundamental group.
Mhm.
That being said, it still shows up in modern day kind of conservative groups. And again, we're not bashing it 100% Because I would imagine it probably does work in some households. Unfortunately, what we know, though, is that it's very damaging for a lot of other families.
Yeah, and a lot of people unfortunately just read the first part of that verse where it talks about, women submitting to your husbands, but a lot of people, especially the guys who subscribe to this, they don't read the next part where it talks about, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and lay down your life and be willing to die for it, right? So like there's this level of love and commitment that men are supposed to be showing to their wives that unfortunately a lot of them don't. They just are this king of the household on a high horse doing whatever the heck they want while the women are just scrambling to meet their needs all the time, and it's just really it's really sad to see. And again, like you said and like I've said before, there are people who do it and they do it well and it works for them and all of that, but so many times we see when it just doesn't work that way. So yeah, so like I said, we don't subscribe to it, but doesn't make it right or wrong. It's just not what we do.
Okay, now I want to talk about this whole TikTok saga
Yeah.
about this lady named Kendra who fell in love with her psychiatrist, communicated all of that to him. He still decided to keep her. Their whole therapeutic relationship lasted a couple of years.
Mhm.
So she is on TikTok doing this whole series talking about how she was attracted to him immediately. And over time, she would start to tell him certain things like when she was ovulating, and
Oh my gosh.
she had a sex dream about him, and she would read into things and what seems like delusions
Mhm.
and misunderstand his boundary setting and things like that. She is really into Chat GPT, which she named, and she would consult all the things that are happening in her sessions with the psychiatrist to Chat GPT, which would just confirm her delusions.
Right, which is what AI does.
Yeah. And it was a whole thing. Mind you, she is seeing this psychiatrist once a month
Mhm.
for 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And so someone calculated it all and they're like, she has spent less than 1 day with him.
Yeah.
So, anyways, I wanted to bring it up because I wanted to just talk about how, as clinicians, it's really difficult when we're in situations like this where there is transference most likely happening. What do we do? So, we don't know her diagnosis. All we know is that she has ADHD. That is what she's communicated was her qualifying diagnosis to see him for medication management. That being said, it does seem like maybe there are other things going on,
Probably.
but we don't know. And it's not even really helpful for us to guess, only because when you do diagnose a client, there's so much that goes into it.
Yeah.
And she is not our client. Anyways, it is very difficult for us, and we do talk about it in school,
Mhm.
and we talk about it in our clinical supervision. But yeah, sometimes when someone is going through a crisis or when someone is experiencing something like psychosis, which delusions fall under that, it's hard because we're clinicians, but we're also human.
Yeah, for sure.
And so maybe what we wanna do is run, but ethically, that may not be the best thing.
Mhm.
Maybe we wanna just transfer it out immediately, but what if that's not even an option? And so, what are your thoughts about that whole situation?
On the surface, it seems like a crazy story that it's really entertaining to listen to because this lady is clearly not in touch with reality. Because a lot of the things that she's saying are signs of him loving her are really basic things like asking about her life because he needs to know if the medications he's prescribing are actually working. But she's interpreting it as, he's in love with me. But so it's entertaining on the surface, but when you look at the impact that this is potentially having on his practice, on his life, I don't know if he's married, but she named him so people know who he is with his real name, not an alias or anything like that. So people can look him up. And the reality is, we're clinicians, so we can clearly see that there is potentially some delusions there. But if people are taking it at face value, which a lot of people are siding with her on these things, they can ruin his career and ruin his life. So it's a really dangerous and potentially harmful thing that she's doing by having this whole series and sharing all of this. But beyond that, just going back to what you've mentioned with how difficult it can be as for us as clinicians, it does happen, and it has happened to me before where a client was engaging in transference, and transference is just like, when you are attributing things that you've experienced with someone else onto your therapist. So if you are having issues with your dad and you're getting mad at the therapist, but really you're mad at your dad. So that's kind of what transference is. But yeah, there have been cases where it's happened with kids where they didn't have a dad and they start to kind of look up to me as their dad or be really affectionate towards me. And I just have to set those boundaries and, not if I can see that happening, if they try to go in for a hug, I just maybe do a side hug, but also just do like fist bumps. It's kind of a case by case, but I've had to just kind of set those boundaries for them. And sometimes they've asked like, "Oh, can you come to my birthday party?" And I'm like, "Oh, I can't do that. I have to, I'm not allowed to go to, kids' birthday parties or whatever." Just kind of say like what you can and can't do. And I mean, it sucks because sometimes they're hurt by it. But one of the main tenets of LPCs, licensed professional counselors, is first do no harm. So I always tell parents too that there are things that are hurtful, and then there are things that are harmful. Sometimes we have to do things for kids that are hurtful, but it's not going to be harmful, right? And sometimes not doing those hurtful things can be harmful. So if I'm going to be so consumed with not hurting their feelings, I could potentially do something that's really harmful for them and their healing and their process. So I've definitely seen it happen and it can be difficult. Um, but at the end of the day, my concern is their safety and their well being. And I know leaning into that and feeding my ego by making myself feel like, "Oh, I'm important," or whatever, can really harm them. So, have you experienced transference in your practice or just in your career?
No, I haven't experienced that, but I do know that that is a possibility,
Mhm.
so I'm always on alert for that. But I wanted to speak on 2 things. One, reminding people how intimate the therapeutic space is.
Yeah.
These people are telling us everything,
Mhm.
and especially if it's long term, you are going to build up a relationship of sorts.
Mhm.
It's a therapeutic relationship. But yeah, you're still telling this person your deepest, darkest secrets.
Mhm.
You feel comfortable with them. They're using these evidence based research interventions on you that are helping you out.
Mhm.
Oftentimes, especially if you go to them in crisis and then you turn around, you feel like you owe them your life.
Right.
So it is very real. So I do have empathy for clients who do experience that because it can easily blur the lines,
Mhm.
especially if that person doesn't have a strong social support system,
Right.
which I believe is the case for Kendra, the woman that we're talking about in this TikTok series. But what's interesting is that she was seeing a psychiatrist.
Right.
Typically, psychiatrists do not provide therapy.
Mhm.
They're strictly there for medication management.
Right.
Now, there are some psychiatrists who do, but at least with the ones that we've worked with, no, they're so busy. They're scheduled back to back. They're medical doctors. So they're truly just focused on what medication you're taking.
Mhm.
Do we need to titrate up? Do we need to titrate down? And a lot of the times when you start to talk about some of these other things, they will ask you, do you have a therapist? I know my clients have said that when they tell the psychiatrist or the psychiatric nurse practitioner that they do have a therapist, they're like, yes, because they like that combination of medication and psychotherapy.
Yeah.
So the fact that she was seeing him once a month for 30 minutes and going through all of this is just very interesting.
Yeah.
Another thing is countertransference.
Mhm.
So obviously, we're just hearing one side. We have no idea what actually happened in their sessions.
Right.
There is a chance that the psychiatrist was saying certain things that were inappropriate. Countertransference is essentially the same thing as transference, but it's coming from the clinician.
Right.
where they're starting to see you in a specific way like they would someone else.
Mhm.
And that's another thing that we learn about in school and in
Yeah,
supervision is checking that. Like, okay, we've got eyes, so we have clients that we may be attracted to, or we may have clients that remind us of our dad or remind us of someone else. And so it's really important for us to make sure that the moves that we're making in session aren't because of that countertransference.
yeah.
So yeah, right now we're listening to her series and all we have is her point of view. And so it makes sense why she's painting this clear picture to some people of I'm the victim. But
Right.
yeah, there's a chance that there are some things that were happening. At the end of the day, she could report him to the board,
Yeah.
and then his board would do an investigation and see if there's any merit there. But what sucks is that she doxed him. She was on a live and accidentally said his name, but then kept doing it.
Yeah.
So yeah, everybody knows his first and last name. His picture is floating around, and other people could report him when they did not work with him. That really wouldn't make sense because it should be about firsthand
Mhm.
experience instead of we heard about this person, so bored, go ahead and do something about it. But at the end of the day, it's a he said, she said.
Right. I will say, yeah, this is something that can happen easily because, like you said, you are talking about some really deep, heavy things, and like we've talked about with relationships and with cheating and all of that, vulnerability breeds intimacy, and so you are being extremely vulnerable with this person for an hour at a time, and in this case, half an hour at a time. And yeah, if you don't have anybody else in your life that you're doing that with, this is the only person that's hearing this stuff. And so you start to feel really close to them naturally because you're spending all this time with them and having these deep conversations with them. And at the end of the day, as clinicians, we are the professionals, right? Like they are not held to any ethical standards as clients. Like they are just people. And so it's our job to see if something is starting to go a certain type of way and set those boundaries ourselves and protect ourselves and at the end of the day protect them because if you are feeding into their delusions or feeding into their transference it's just going to harm them at the end of the day. So there's a lot that we have to juggle as clinicians and a lot of things that we have to see ethically, legally, and professionally to try to balance and do what's best for these people that we see on a daily basis.
Yeah. It's worth it.
It is, yeah. It's yeah, it's challenging. There's a lot of things that go into it. It's not just talking for an hour, right? But yeah, it is worth it, and we love what we do, and we're so grateful to be able to do this every day.
So yeah, just also want to say it appears that she's delusional,
Mhm.
but for her it is reality. So I just want to throw that out there that that was my opinion,
Yeah,
but she never once said,
I'm having delusions.
right.
Yeah, which can be hard. So, as a clinician working with someone who's experiencing psychosis, whether that's delusions or hallucinations, can be difficult because, yeah, like you said, it is their reality, and so the challenge is to do some reality testing to see, you know, if their reality lines up with everyone else's reality around them, right? And kind of seeing if you can start to recognize like these are delusions or these are hallucinations. This isn't real. You're seeing them, but it's not really there, right?
And it just sucks because she was going to chat GPT with
Yeah.
all of this. And of course, it was just,
Confirming everything.
yeah. Oh, yeah, girl. And she
Yeah.
also had a therapist at this time who kind of was going along with it as well.
Jeez.
Now, of course, we don't know what was actually being said.
Yeah.
The therapist can only know so much. So, yeah, she did have these kind of confirmation bias around her. So that makes it even more difficult. It's not like you had someone being like, girl, what?
Yeah.
Run.
Yeah. Yeah. I just kind of wanted to end with at the end of the day, all we have is her side of the story. We don't have the whole picture. But based on what I know and what I've heard, I do question whether or not the psychiatrist should have referred out. Not necessarily because it wasn't his level of expertise or within his scope of practice. So it's not a matter of competence, but I do wonder if he should have referred out because it was interrupting her process. Because from what we're seeing, what we're hearing, she was totally in love with him, and this is interrupting her ability to completely process what's happening and be fully present and authentic and what's happening with her medication, all that, which is what his job is. So I do wonder if he should have referred out to just kind of nip that part in the bud because I wonder if she was with someone that she was not attracted to, if she could have gotten better care in general. Again, nothing against him, but just because of where she was at. I think if I was him and what we're hearing is what reality was, for this to be ongoing for a few years, I probably would have referred out at that point, but again, we don't know the whole story.
Yeah, I agree. I would have as well
Yeah.
after exhausting all of the things in my toolbox.
Yeah.
At that point, I would refer her to someone. I would do that case consultation, do that warm transfer,
Yeah.
and let them know exactly what was happening and say good riddance. But again, it's not always feasible. It's not always the easiest thing, especially if someone's in active crisis. It's a difficult decision. You want to make sure that they're going to be okay because sometimes someone like her would become suicidal
Yeah.
if there's any kind of conversation about that, and you wouldn't even be able to complete that warm transfer.
Right. Yeah, it's a sticky situation. Anyway, that was just our 2 cents on that situation and just kind of what we go through as clinicians sometimes when it comes to transference, countertransference, all of that. But let us know if you have any opinions about this story or if you have any opinions about this whole idea of submission and wives submitting to their husbands or any of that. If you have any experience with that or if you agree with it, don't agree with it, whatever it looks like.
Thank you guys as always for tuning in. And please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, share this episode with someone who you think could benefit from it. All right. See you next time.
Later.
Bye.